Judges, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Good afternoon. Congratulations on making it to the top 12. We're looking forward to hearing from you. My name is Lindsay Draper. I'm retired from the juvenile court bench here in Milwaukee County, Wisconsin.
I'm Steve Franczyk, retired professor of political science from the U.S. Naval Academy. You're muted.
Sorry. My name is Candida Steele, and I'm retired as a judge on the U.S. Civilian Board of Contract Appeals, and I live in Maine.
Would you introduce yourselves and your teacher, please?
Good afternoon. I'm Michael Massa, and we are all juniors at Easthampton High School. My name is Jonathan Gallagher, and we are representing the state of Massachusetts.
My name is Braden Lynn. This is our wonderful teacher, Miss Kelly Brown.
Hello.
And as I understand it, she's wonderful. Is that what you said?
Very wonderful.
Okay. Okay. All right. It is the first question from Unit 6. Disband your deluded followers. Should you attempt to fire upon the troops of government, the consequences might be fatal to many of your men, the least guilty. What useful purposes, if any, have rebellions served throughout American history? Do the events of January 6, 2021 at the U.S. Capitol constitute a rebellion? Why or why not? Are there rebellions in the world today that are justified? Why or why not? Begin.
From 1786 to 1787, indebted farmers in West Massachusetts rebelled against Governor James Bowdoin and his austerity measures that threatened their livelihood. Led by Daniel Shays, thousands of men peacefully shut down courthouses all across Hampshire County and opened defiance against the law, despite a proclamation, riot act, and militia act to punish those who were not joining in suppressing the rebellion. Bowdoin was supposed to hire a private militia led by Benjamin Lincoln in order to suppress this rebellion. This farmers' movement included all common elements of a rebellion: desire for institutional change, disturbing the peace, obstructing the law, open defiance to government officials, and creating sustained disorder that cannot be brought under control by conventional government tactics.
Throughout American history, rebellions have had mixed results in creating change in government. Rebellions generally have three outcomes. Outcome one is rebellions can lead to a successful revolution. The American Revolution was a reform-based rebellion that developed into a full-scale revolution. Outcome two is that some rebellions evoke oppositional results. For example, Gabriel Prosser, Denmark Vesey, and Nat Turner all sought to end slavery through violent rebellion, but the institutional results were tighter laws and harsher treatment of enslaved people. Outcome three is some rebellions are successful in creating change. The civil rights movement is a good example of this, which used nonviolent civil disobedience to gain empathy and create institutional change, shown in the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Acts. While most rebellions involve some form of violence, those in which rebels use nonviolence but are met by oppositional violent force tend to lead to more institutional reform.
The January 6th riot meets certain criteria for rebellion. However, it lacks a clear goal for institutional change and sustained disorder that cannot be brought into control by conventional means. The insurrectionists at the Capitol were actively trying to stop the election process because they believed the presidential election was rigged. Their actions could be considered part of a larger rational choice-based rebellion, a theory described by political scientist Gordon Tullock. Despite President Trump and his associates' actions to stop the transfer of power, there is clearly a more sustained effort with institutional goals.
The protesters were united under similar purpose and ideology to stop a fraudulent election, and triggered by disaffected elites within the government. The insurrectionists justified this rebellion with information that was and is being continually fed to them about election fraud and corruption. President Trump was a disaffected elite because he was voted out of power. He also stated multiple times that he would not concede and he would continue to fight the supposed corruption. His words were not seen as a direct statement of rebellion, but he did influence people who rebelled, intentional or not.
To be clear, rebellions are always justified in the eyes of rebels, and no one wants to be in or lead a rebellion. As Jefferson stated, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. We believe rebellions that are justified must have a systemic violation of fundamental rights. All other methods of redress have been exhausted, and it must be peaceful, accepting actions of self-defense. The Palestinian rebellion in the territory of Israel is a rebellion that we view as justified but ineffective. Several attempts have been made by many governments in an attempt to stop violence between the two states and settle disputes, but all attempts have failed as of yet.
Another rebellion that is justified today took place in Kazakhstan in early 2022. People were answered with violence in the face of peaceful protests against unjust fuel pricing laws and rebelled against the government in acts of prolonged unrest and boycotts, although not all rebellions today are justified. The rebellions that took place in the Donbass region of Ukraine after 2014 and up until February 24th, 2022, in the regions Donetsk and Luhansk, were an attempt to secede from Ukraine. These rebellions were a product of several misinformation and propaganda campaigns by the Russian state in order to cause unrest and rebellion. Because the Ukrainians in Donbass were in a state where they were guaranteed rights and they were protected, the rebellions that took place there were unjustified. Thank you, and we are now ready for your questions.
Thank you. Sort of trying to tie that last portion of your presentation to your comments about January 6th. Does the disinformation that some clearly local sources, I mean, they were our people, they were Americans, but kind of said, no, it's not that we lost, it's that they cheated. I mean, we aren't going to be the grown people and admit that we lost the election. Does that come across the same as not an appropriate argument as did the Donbass effort to secede? I mean, isn't it the same cheating and lies?
No, the January 6th insurrection and rebellion was fused by misinformation within the government. And it's irresponsible by the people themselves who participated in the rebellion. It's their responsibility to track down misinformation and disinformation that was being continually fed to them. There was many studies by Brennan Center, Columbia University, both found that there was little to no fraud in the 2020 election. Even considerably conservative foundations, such as the Heritage Foundation, found there was little to no fraud. They found 4 criminal convictions of proven fraud in Massachusetts in 2008, and only 1,300 of proven criminal cases of fraud since 1972 in America, the entire country of America. It's irresponsible of the people who participate in the rebellion to not find these sources themselves.
A major source of misinformation and disinformation can be found on social media. How people post false information online in order to get their political candidate that they favor to get elected.
To what degree should the government or the social media platforms limit our free speech?
Can you repeat the question?
In what cases should either social media or the government limit the rights to free speech?
Well, I think that only in social media, when you are agreeing to their guidelines, should you limit the right to free speech. The state action doctrine, which was incorporated in the civil rights cases of 1883, show that your constitutional rights are not allowed on social media. They do not follow you there. This is also followed up by the insular cases that say that the Constitution does not follow the flags. So if you are agreeing to the social media's terms and conditions and agreeing to be a part of that platform, your constitutional rights do not follow you there.
Yeah, I agree with Jonathan. In the case of Brandon Straka, when he was tweeting on January 6th, by the way, he's the leader of the Walk Away movement, which is a very popular right-wing leaning movement. When he was tweeting on January 6th about things like go, 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 like Patriots attack the Capitol, his words, although they were on social media, were held up, or they were held up to the promise of the Brandenburg test, and he did pass the Brandenburg test, and he was convicted for inciting a riot, even though they were on social media.
An interesting distinction to make is that during January 6th, they tried to impeach Trump a second time for inciting the insurrection. However, his speech did not fall under the Brandenburg test established in Brandenburg v. Ohio. His speech did not fall under the promoting imminent lawless action and likely to produce such action. However, social media companies still banned him on sites such as Twitter because he violated the terms of service.
Okay. Do you think that with January 6, 2021, was there a basis for the application of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment to participants in preparation for the events?
I don't think there was a basis. If we can look at the other section of the 14th Amendment, Section 2, it's taking away their right to vote. It says that the right to vote shall not be abridged for any male over the age of 21, except in cases where they commit a crime or participate in a rebellion. The participate in a rebellion is very important because January 6th meets our criteria of rebellion. They are automatically not being allowed to get the right to vote. So I think that just because they violate that section, they also violate Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, and I don't think that those rights should be applied.
And to reiterate, our definition of a rebellion is desire for institutional change, obstructing the law, open defiance of government officials, disturbing the peace, and creating sustained disorder that cannot be brought under control by conventional.
But I think what I'm looking at in Section 3 is the prohibition for members of the government, people who have taken an oath already, and then offer aid and comfort to the rebels or insurrectionists, should not be permitted to run again and serve again in the office. That's the section I'm looking for.
We see this currently with Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's being argued that she violated Section 3 of the 14th Amendment because of her participation in January 6th. And I think that she did violate Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Because of the state action doctrine, even her words on social media, they're actually held up to a level of scrutiny higher than the people because she is a government official. So I think that her words definitely do violate Section 3 of the 14th Amendment.
What do you think is going to happen?
I think she should be barred from ever running again.
Do you think that'll happen?
I don't know. It's hard to say.
So
Okay, Lindsay.
given, if I were to posit that the Civil War involved people from the South who really weren't that far from the American Revolution, who saw that the government wasn't following what they thought it was supposed to be, it was violating their rights, and therefore they justly were leaving this union. Is that a good argument?
Well, I actually, the South believed that the North actually violated the social contract established by John Locke, how a government is meant to serve the citizens and protect their rights. And if the government isn't serving the citizens, then the citizens have the right to rebel. They believed that they knew that the North was not following the fugitive slave law because they were not returning fugitive enslaved people who fled to the North. And that is the reason why they seceded.
And I actually don't think it's very much of a good reason, because the real reason that the South seceded from the North was because of slavery and the fear that it would be abolished. We can see with Westward expansion and the Mexican cession, where slavery was being expanded westward with the Missouri Compromise of 1850, that they wanted more slavery, and they really feared Abraham Lincoln's election. This is shown by the fact that he wasn't on any of the ballots in the Confederate States. He wasn't even an option for them to vote for. So I think that it's completely unjustified, but they believed it's justified. They believed it was justified, and that's the important part.
And just to clarify on the Civil War does not fall under our definition of rebellion because they did not have any desire for institutional change. The South justified its secession based on the idea that the North violated the social contract.
Put yourself in the position of the most radical of the demonstrators on January 6th and give us an idea in terms of how you would defend yourself to your children or your grandchildren. What is the justification for the action?
I think their justification was the fact that they strongly loved their country, and they believed that what was happening was wrong in their country. They believed the 2020 election actually had fraud. 70% of Republicans believe there was something major wrong with the 2020 election. It's not just whether it's widespread fraud or something wrong with the voting systems or something wrong with mail-in ballots, like the COVID expansion with mail-in ballots, early voting, pre-registration. Something was wrong there. They believe that something was wrong. So I feel like they justified it by saying that they wanted to fix what was wrong in America, whether it was actually justified or not. That's how they viewed it.
In addition to what my colleague John said, the two groups that participated in the January 6th riot are the 3%ers and the Proud Boys. The Proud Boys being a conservative national group that aligns with Trump's ideology. They wanted to protest at January 6th. They stormed the Capitol in order to reinstate Trump in power. The 3%ers are a group that believe that the American Revolution only occurred with 3% of the population, which is wrong. But they believe that they can also start a new revolution today using only 3% of the population.
How can you change government and change the personnel, without revolution?
So I think that one of the most important ways that you yourself as an American can change the government is through voting. Voting is something that has been like in America for the whole time. We have had it the whole time. It is like listed in the
Voting is a fundamental right. It passes the Glucksberg test, establishing Glucksberg v. Washington. It's also one of the most important rights we have. Harper v. Virginia Board of Elections stated that it was a fundamental right. So I think just by participating in local government is one of the ways people can express their redresses. And I think that that is what is important. Also, civic education is very important. Our state of Massachusetts passed a MA Civics bill, which granted us the right to have mass civics class in 8th grade. So I feel like that voting along with civic education is one of the main ways that people can express their grievance.
Another way you can express your redress is through the courts and challenging your wrongdoings. You can see in the civil rights movement with Boynton v. Virginia, NAACP v. Alabama, Brown v. Board of Education, Brown v. Board of Education 2, Cooper v. Aaron. May I finish?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. In all those cases, there was wrongdoings and violations of First Amendment, your Bill of Rights, your amendment, your fundamental rights. And they took that to the Supreme Court and they received more rights for African Americans. They received the 13th, 14th, and 15th amendments at the end of the civil rights movement.
Great job. Great job.
So, first of all, thank you. That was very good. Enjoyed it. Want to ask you about a couple of things. Well, actually, I'm not through asking, just comment on a couple of things. One of them, that last point, the recourse to the courts, the recourse to voting, the benefits of civic education really would have been my answer to that question 5 years ago. I'm worried that we've maybe seen an undermining of the institutions that were so critical to us. And every time I, for instance, hear someone use the term critical race theory and use that as an example of how we don't want certain things discussed in schools, that scares me, because the education that we always felt was important, people can challenge it. Voting, we've undermined because we've said everybody cheats, and every institution gets it. So, and I appreciate your optimism. I just don't know that I share it. You were really good. You brought up some very interesting points. And I really like the fact that you tended to say, okay, there are 3 of these, and then you needed to order them, because you made sure that we followed each of the things that you said. You had a system of presenting your information, and I kind of enjoyed that. Good luck to you, and thank you.
Good. I like the fact that you find your terms clearly had some good, both domestic and international examples. I think you're the first one that's brought up Ukraine as being an example. So I think that was effective to give us a contemporary kind of an issue to deal with. So anyway, it was a good job.
I agree. I think that was a great job. All 3 of you participated well, and it was a real conversation going on. You clearly know a whole lot more than you've expressed from, peeling the onion. Every time we got a little further in, you had a whole other range of thinking to share with us. For example, I had no idea that Lincoln wasn't on the ballot in the South. And so that was fascinating. This is a wonderful experience for me, even at the age of 72. So thank you so much. You I hope have been inspired by this experience and will not only be good citizens and vote as you should when you can, you'll influence those around you and educate those around you. And I hope you will consider representing some of us in elected positions in state, local, or federal government, or serving the government in some fashion or another as a government employee, because we desperately need people working in the government to know what the government's supposed to be doing. So, and I think you've shown thoroughly that you have a really good idea of that. Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and best of luck.